we build the world we live in. And in any role that we play, we have the chance to make that world as extraordinary as we want it to be. So I always say, be the change you want to see in the world, actually like Gandhi says, but I also say, seed the change that you want to see in the world.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host Aish, and today we have a CX expert with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our amazing guests, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code digital CX platform, available across 14 channels with 45,000 solutions, created across 107 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest. Rosaria Cirillo is the founder, author, happiness change catalyst, CX management advisor, and trainer at Now Customer Experience. She has been advising large multinationals and fast-growing medium companies about customer experience through her workshops, customer experience masterclasses, and public talks. Customer experience has been her passion and profession, while multiplying happiness and creating a more customer-centered world is her drive, as she wants to transform the way companies imagine, design, and deliver experiences and happiness. So welcome to the show, Rosario. We're thrilled to have you.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much. Good afternoon and good evening, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're so glad you could make it. But before we dive into our interview with Rosario, don't forget to subscribe to Engati and tap the bell icon to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders from around the globe. So, Rosario, let me start off with my first question. Can you please shed some light on your concept, Yellow Factor, Happiness in Business?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking these questions. So I guess it's all started 2 years ago when I published my first book called Yellow Goldfish. And the way with my co-author we define yellow goldfish is that the little extra companies can do to contribute to happiness for customers, employees, and society. And over the past 2 years, that concept has grown even more to yellow factor, because it's not only up to the companies and to the people who work in the companies, but I really believe that each of us, even when we decide not to differentiate our company through happiness, but each of us can have his own yellow factor. And with that, I mean that little extra with which we can seed happiness in the world, we can shine our light just by being us. And ultimately contribute to a healthier, happier, and more peaceful world, and ultimately also more sustainable. So that's really, for me, the yellow factor. It's like that little seed that each of us can always provide and contribute to.
Cool. So how can organizations set up the NPS measurement framework across different regions and touchpoints?
A really continuous part of my work as well over the past few years, and it's been in companies been one of the critical ways to gather the voice of the customer. But it really only makes sense if you are then able to actually act upon that voice of the customer. And when it comes to setup, it has to be first very clear what type of objective are you trying to achieve with your NPS survey. And when it comes to setting it up across different countries or touch point, it also depends on how ready your company is. So the first thing is, how ready is your company? Can you go for really big bang type of approach, or do you have to do it in phases? And what I see is that most likely it still will be in phases. At the very beginning, you have to have a pilot to prove the point internally, but also to learn. You have to learn always, like in a very much type of also design thinking approach and human-centered approach. You need to first learn what works and what doesn't work. And you can only do that by really first launching a pilot, which works like your prototype. And then based on those learnings, you can go and replicate across the different countries and all the different touch points. That has been one of the ways we have done it also with a number of clients that I advise. Really first learning and then deploy. And of course, you need to have people ready. So you need to have the technology, you have to choose the right technology for your purpose, and you have to have the right people in each of the local organization both because they can drive it locally, but also because they are the one to voice what is needed at local level, so they can really feel completely engaged into the overall project.
Are there any challenges with setting it up across different regions?
Yeah, so the challenge it's about like being able to think globally but also act locally. So that's really where it's like, okay, what we want to do at global level, does it also apply for each and every country, or does this country has a different type of needs or different type of setup? Is the customer base the same? Or also one thing that I see very often being forgotten is the different roles. So are we just survey the customers, and who within that customer base are we serving? Especially in B2B, are we serving the end user, the decision maker, the buyer? Who are we serving? And that has to be very clear, and that can be very different at local level. So that has to be taken into account as well.
Definitely. Especially, I've seen that a lot of times with different regions, a lot of the customer expectations itself shift. So it must be super challenging to set up across different regions.
Yeah, communication is really key. So what we did in the project where we have to do it across different countries, the important thing is to involve the countries from the very first step. So like you cannot just dump it on them. You really need to have the people from the country involved from the beginning. So what we had the local customer experience manager or the local customer loyalty manager involved from the beginning, really also at the operational level. But then also before every launch, we also always had a management meeting with the CEO, with the board, and with the most relevant people from each department. So it was clear also from them from the beginning what we were going to do, the type of support also we needed from them, and then afterwards what were the results also of the survey, and therefore also what type of changes need to be driven. And very often the changes have to be driven also at local level. And that's where that commitment is absolutely essential. Otherwise, you have great input and insight, but nobody's going to follow up with the actions.
I like that you mentioned that you have sort of local managers everywhere, because like you mentioned, no one really understands the local customer as well as someone who's from the area.
Absolutely.
It's so important that you mentioned that. So moving on to my next question. Regarding, since we've spoken so much about operating locally, how does one go about setting up a multilingual call center? Do you think that organizations need agents from different parts of the world?
So it very much depends on the situation. So like in my experience, there is never like one answer or one solution fits all. It's very much dependent on the type of organization. I had quite some experience both. Before starting Now, I used to work for Philips and for the Adobe Contact Center, and in both cases, we had very, very international contact center. We had to support entire Europe. So it very much depends. So like at Adobe was a pretty much a big contact center. We had over 100 FTEs between customer service and technical support. And at some point, we also started a dedicated sales team. And that one, for example, was only about 12 to then later on 16 agents. So we had about 2 to 3 agents per language, but you also had to have a lot of coverage of cross language. So one way, and in both cases, I have to say, both with Philips and with Adobe, they were outsourced contact center. So it's very often, like in-house, it's more complicated often to find that language capabilities. While if you go in an outsourced environment, you have that, you can rely on the specialist to hire for you the right skill set and the right people and the right language competencies. But also what can happen is that if you have incredibly low volume of calls, they can also use similar agents across multiple accounts, at least at beginning. And the other thing was, in both cases, they were based in Amsterdam, which is a very international, for example, capital. So where it's more likely that you have international people or people speaking multiple languages, and therefore it's easier to find those agents. In the meantime, I think with all the digitalization, and especially this year, it's like I've been seeing so many new solutions of completely virtual workplaces, and especially when it comes to contact center, where you can actually hire people from everywhere in the world, getting the right language skills becomes even easier. And because people can work from home, it also allows you to plug in the right type of people even when somebody calls in sick or is not available. So there is so much more flexibility there, which also allows you, it lowers your costs in a way, and it also allows you to have the right number of people even for low volume.
But I wanted to know, we at a larger scale, it's much easier to sort of outsource these talents. But is it really sustainable for more SMEs, in your opinion?
Again, it depends very much on how you set it up, and also what does it bring to you. I mean, is it just a cost source, or does it also improve your customer experience? Does it also, like, it's again the cost benefit analysis. And if you have the right revenues in place coming in, then sure you can keep it. It very much depends also how small is the small business, and then where is it? Because I imagine if you are supporting multiple language, you are not that small. So then you will be able, in your revenue always goes up also at the same level as your customer base. And then if you let the two go up at the same time, then you are able to sustain it as well. Was there a different reason for your question? Have you seen situations in which it's not working?
It's mainly because, like, say for example, here in India, there are a lot of languages being spoken in this country. So in situations like that, then what would you sort of propose?
I see that's an area. So like I love that before, we mentioned how important it is the local situation, and this is one of those cases, because I'm thinking from a European perspective where we have like, okay, 6-7 language, and I'm like, I didn't think of the Indian perspective.
And another example is like Canada, for example. So over there, most people do operate in English, but there are certain provinces that only operate in French. So in situations like that, how would you sort of approach it?
Then in that situation, normally it's quite likely that you do have, I mean, at least here we quite have many people which speak at least 2 languages. I mean, to find somebody who speaks both English and French is really not that difficult. It's quite common here in Europe. I speak Italian, English, and Dutch. And in the contact center where I've been, like, most people spoke at least 2 or 3 languages. And then technology comes also into help, because then you can have also, like, you have to have the right routing, and with technology that it allows you to say, okay, if for this customer is only willing to speak in French, is going to go straight to the only French available agent. If he's also willing to speak in English, and at the moment I only have 1 French agent available, I might route this customer to English, so that instead I can have the French specialized only for the customers who don't speak English. But I'm not sure if in India it's much more difficult to find people who speak multiple languages. Is it?
Kind of. Luckily, I think there's one common language, but at the same time, a lot of people, like, for example, with myself, I don't speak that common language. I only speak English and a sub-language, so it gets a little bit more complicated.
Okay.
Hence the question. So we'll move on to the next question. How do we align? So we talked about setting up multiple call centers across different countries, but how do we sort of align them towards a common goal? Is there an alternative to this? Like, how do we sort of communicate that there's this goal to follow? Because I don't know, I feel like at times with multiple call centers, things can kind of get lost in translation. So how do we sort of align everyone to just this one goal?
So it goes back, one, to communication and to clarity. So it's that one goal has to be very clear. So in all the customer experience masterclass also that I teach, or that in the strategy session I do with companies, we really make sure that it's clear what's the overall experience that the company intends to provide. That's also like your CX strategy. What are your brand values, and then how those brand values translate into customer promises. So what is that we expect? What is that we always promise the customers that we want to stand for? Do we want to stand for fun, simplicity, effectiveness? What is it we want to stand for? Speed, safety? And how does this translate into employees' behavior? So if it's about friendliness, that we stand for friendliness, is that, for example, the Ritz-Carlton, they concretize it into you always give a warm welcome, you always use the customer name, and you always wish them goodbye. That's extremely concrete. And if you give those very concrete behaviors then to whoever your agents are, then that creates clarity. But the other key element is also involve them. So like I do a lot of workshop also with the companies and with the contact center frontline to say, okay, how do you see this coming to life? So the company wants you to be friendly, but what does it mean friendly to you? So you also have to help still people be themselves. Rather than dictating from the top what friendliness might mean, it's also allow them to see what is it and how does it manifest for you. So back at Philips, we had our designed around you, easy to experience, and advanced. And then we could work, okay, what do they mean for us? What do they mean at the contact center? Easy to experience. Does it mean that I will do everything possible to solve your issue in one call? And if I'm not able to solve it within one call, I will call you back until I have a resolution rather than you calling me back. Advanced. Can we have a continual update on the status of your order without you having to go on the website to check? So you really have to see in practice, what does this translate into? And then also we say, make it also come back into your reward and into your engagement. And I'm looking around if I have it still at hand. But what yes, let me actually get it. I see it's here. What we had at the contact center of Adobe, and I'm talking 3 years ago now, we had 18 practices that we always wanted to have that would apply. I can tell you, like, for example, the number 4 was smile, enjoy what you do. That was one of the practice. And we had something like those one, which were the superstar awards, which, which each of us, everybody, every agent or the manager, anyone could assign it to anybody else into the organization. And they would always point out which practice does it refer to. So this one, I got it, for example, for respecting the stream practice number 3, invest time, and stream practice number 13, set and manage expectations. And by just getting those simple things, it keeps remind you what is expected from you, but in a way that celebrates what you actually have done well. Which then, and that's also for me what I call the yellow factor, because then those become little examples of yellow goldfish or yellow factor, because are little incentives which actually create happiness in a very simple way. Because this one ultimately, like a little certificate, even from a biological point of view, it gives us a shot of dopamine. And dopamine is one of the key 4 hormones that we need, the chemicals that we need to be happy. So it's also part of what I do. It's to help companies find more of those ways to really inject happiness into the daily life of the customer, of the employees, or just in every action that we can do. Because in this case, to provide this certificate provides happiness for the giver, because it's something fun to do, but also a lot of happiness for the receiver. And it ultimately contributes to the company because it reinforces the practices or the values that they want to bring. So it's one of those win-win for everyone.
I think it kind of is. It kind of reminds me of, like, it's not even about an act or anything like that. It's sort of like a culture. So in order to sort of like get that goal aligned, I feel like it has to start from a top down. It has to be within the culture of the of the company. Sorry, it's not just the department.
No, it has to be everywhere. And but culture, I would say also, a culture is something that you nurture. And, even in the company, there is a little bit of nature, like the first employees or the founder of the company may start the culture, but then who you keep hiring and each and every practice that you keep putting in place, that's what makes up your culture. So even when you define the practices, that helps create that culture. I mean, that's also like the strength of Zappos. By creating their 10 values, that is what constituted their culture. And then what people do around those values just keeps reinforcing that culture.
So you mentioned, while we were talking about this question, you mentioned the happiness driven growth model. So could you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so absolutely. So that is really, it's now actually already 4 years so that concept was born. It started back in 2016 when I also gave my first TEDx talk on the happiness-driven growth as a new life-enriching business model. And the trigger for that was that I was helping companies moving from product-driven to customer-driven. And in our CX world, there was a lot of talk about customer-driven growth. And yet to me, it felt like, yeah, I mean, I've been a customer experience doer and believer since 2002 when I wrote my master thesis on it. And it was just when the concept came up with Bruce Temkin and Forrester Research. But for me, it was like, it felt like it was not enough. You know, it could also be misinterpreted. And at the end, there was also a lot of discussion. Is it customer, employees, who comes first? And for me, it was like the discussion, like who is at the center of the world, of the system, of the solar system, the sun or the earth? And I'm like, it's a discussion of or rather than doing and. It's about the shareholders and the customer and the employee and purpose. And our ultimate goal is happiness. So why don't we put happiness at the center? We let our growth be driven by happiness, and every planet can orbitate around it, and therefore the customer, the employees, purpose, shareholders, they all benefit from it. And then I start building around it. So an happiness became even an acronymus, which you find also in my book, Yellow Gold Factor, and in Yellow Goldfish, they then became books. There you find the entire model. Happiness really has 9 elements, which are the 9 yellow factors that we can all have. And it really stands for, the first one, the H is for health. So it's about how can we contribute to health of employees, of customer, or society. The A is for autonomy. So it's like, how can we enable people to do the best that they can do? And I think here, like in chatbot, for example, it's one way also of enable more autonomy for the people, the customers, that they can be able to do things on their own, in their own timing, but also by automatizing a lot of repetitive tasks for the employees. So that is also contributing to happiness, because if you take employees out of repetitive tasks and they can use their time for creative, more brain-driven type of tasks, then they will be also happier. And then you have the P, that is for purpose. The second P is for play. I is for integrity. N is for nature, which is also beauty and delight by design. And then we have the E for empathy. So that's all about connection and belonging. The 2 S's, one is for simplicity, and the final S, it's for smile, which is about celebration and also gratitude. So those are the 9 elements of happiness. And the what? Then the driven represents also the 6 disciplines of customer experience. So define that vision and strategy, which we also already spoke about. The second one, the R, is for researching and understanding customer needs and human nature. Then you have the I for innovation and improvement. The V for validation, which is measure and everything related to ROI. The NPS measures also some of the things that you asked. Then you have the E for enable and execute. So that's your governance system. And the last one, the N, is exactly for nurture the culture, which we said is also an important element. And then comes to growth, which is really about it's the way, so it's the stages of the maturity, from just being grounded and starting your journey to really reaching up, challenging the status quo, orchestrating the new ways of acting and working. The W is for wow blossoming, which is also like the beginning of my company name, Wow Now. And the last 2 of growth are really about the T for taking time. Everything we do take time, and we need to take time also to rest and recharge. And finally, the H is for harvesting. Once you've done the entire cycle, then we can harvest the result and trust that they will come. So that's in a nutshell the entire happiness-driven growth model.
Wow, that's incredible. That's a really, really useful model. I think all companies should sort of implement this. It's not, I find that with customer experience, it's not just about the customer, it's like the employee experience is equally as important.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad you've shared this with us.
Thank you. Absolutely. I would say like it's the employee experience and the customer experience are two sides of the same coin. Just as it is also like, especially now with the digital world and also with platform economy, there is so much mixing. I was just having a conversation around today about how much also the supplier experience is also another side of the customer experience, because sometimes your suppliers are also your customers. So I was talking with a CX colleague about Amazon, where on Amazon, a lot of us are customers of the Amazon platform, but in some cases, we are also the suppliers, the seller, because now that so many more people get onto the Amazon platform to sell their products, they are also sellers. And if Amazon is very strong on customer experience, but not so much on seller experience. So I hear a lot of complaints there. And I'm like, if those complaints keep going up, and I myself as author on Amazon, I have my part of complaints. But if those complaints keep going up, and the sellers or the author keep having very bad experiences, those people are also the customers. And what they experience on one side will impact the choices that they make on the other side as a customer. And it's the same with employee experience. If the employee experience is not good, you will not deliver a very good experience to your customers as an employee. But at some point, you will also not be a customer for your own company. And the first chance that you have to quit your company, you will also leave. And that brings a lot of costs, because then you have to recruit again, you have to start the entire loop again. So that's where I say also to my clients that actually happy customers and happy employees, they in itself are the most profitable and the most sustainable type of resources, because happy customers buy more, they provide you with more feedback, they give you referrals, they do word of mouth, they are valuable for you. And the employees, they have better return on investment, because they're more productive, they call in less sick, they have less turnover, and ultimately they're just more creative and more productive for you.
I think you also mentioned how using certain tools can really enhance the sort of employee experience, like using chatbots for monotonous tasks. So yeah, very interesting. I didn't even think about the whole two sides of the same coins. That's really eye-opening for me, actually.
Cool, thanks.
So are there any other sound bites you'd like to leave to our audience?
I think for me the key one, it's really about like what I always try to say also to all my clients in every conversation I have is like, we build the world we live in, and in any role that we play, we have the chance to make that world as extraordinary as we want it to be. So I always say, be the change you want to see in the world, like actually like Gandhi says, but I also say, seed the change that you want to see in the world. With each and every act that you do, you will create that new world. And for me, it's really about bringing into the world more HCX, what I call human-centered and happiness contributing experiences. So really design your experiences around the fact that we are all human beings, and then make sure that they are meaningful and that they contribute to happiness for everyone. And then I guess, the question I would like to leave everybody with is like, in which world would you rather live in? And if it's a world of happiness, what will be your yellow factor? What are you going to see in the world and drive as a change?
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Rosario, and for giving us your time. Your insights were really eye-opening, and I know our audience is really going to enjoy this interview.
Thank you so much to you for giving this opportunity and for bringing the voice of CX expert around the world to reach more people. That's also a way to contribute to happiness and to inspire more people and sharing knowledge. So thank you to you. Pleasure to be here.
Much. So we'll be back with a new episode with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next one.